When people think of Keir Starmer's record as Director of Public Prosecutions, something he always likes to remind us about, and being in charge of the Crown Prosecution Service, they might think of Julian Assange, for example, being pursued by the CPS. That in 2011, when Sweden tried to drop their extradition case against Assange, the CPS told the Swedish prosecutor via email to not treat his case as just another extradition and don't you dare get cold feet. This information was obtained by a Freedom of Information request, but other documentation from that time has either been destroyed or was heavily redacted. Now, they might think of the Jimmy Savile case and why the CPS did not pursue him in 2009, why his case was dropped. You might even recall from last week that Starmer took credit in Parliament for prosecuting speeding Lib Dem Chris Hume, despite it actually having been somebody else. These are the standout cases, perhaps, from Starmer's tenure as DPP in most people's minds. However, a new book by journalist Oliver Eagleton, out today, called The Starmer Project, A Journey to the Right, has examined his record as DPP still further. Now, Eagleton has written for The Guardian, The Times Literary Supplement, Jacobin, Navarra, and others, so he's widely respected across the political spectrum, making his findings all the more damning. Starmer, for example, was working directly with the US Department of Justice, who wanted Gary McKinnon, you might remember the case, an autistic IT expert who had hacked US military databases looking for information on UFOs. This embarrassed the US so badly, they indicted him and he was facing 70 years in prison. Now, after years of failed appeals to avoid extradition, the then Home Secretary Theresa May decided he was such a suicide risk due to his vulnerabilities that she would not extradite him. She of the go home vans, the hostile environment of Windrush, actually stood by this guy. Starmer, however, was reportedly furious. So furious, he went straight to the US to offer assurances that such things should not jeopardize their future relationship. There was the case of Binyam Mohamed, a terrorist suspect tortured upon arrest in Pakistan under the supervision of the FBI and visited frequently by MI5 agents who told Mohamed if he didn't tell them what they wanted to know, he'd be sent somewhere worse. Well, he ended up in Morocco, where he was slashed with razor blades, burnt, and deprived of sleep. Starmer chose not to prosecute the lead MI5 officer involved in that. In 2008, Israel bombed Gaza, killing some 1,400 Palestinians. When the then Israeli Foreign Secretary Tzipi Livni arrived in Britain, the Haldane Society of Socialist Lawyers handed a private application for her arrest to Starmer, then a member of the society, on war crimes charges. Starmer delayed it, giving the Foreign Office time to offer her temporary diplomatic immunity. Starmer, of course, was later then thrown out of the society for the basic reason he wasn't actually a socialist. Now, for someone hailed as a great human rights barrister, he seems to give little consistent devotion to human rights, as these examples show. For someone who loves to talk about being the Director of Public Prosecutions, he's conspicuous in how little he talks about his actual work there, and seemingly for good reason. We know he supports Zionism without qualification, so his favoritism towards somebody regarded enough as a war criminal for an arrest application to be issued is shameful, as is his continued support for the apartheid regime since becoming Labour leader, to the cost of members across this country. He's ignored torture, ignored disability, to the point he placed himself to the right of Theresa May on human rights issues. Even kids weren't spared. During the 2011 riots, Starmer insisted courts run 24 hours a day, including on weekends, resulting in kids as young as 13 being taken to court at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, separated from parents, and in some cases apparently denied food or water. He chose not to prosecute the police officers involved in the Jean-Charles de Menezes shooting, which some might recall was a botched operation that was overseen at the time by Cressida Dick, who later went on to become Met Police Commissioner, with everything that's followed under her tenure. Perhaps if she or others had been prosecuted, this wouldn't have ever come about. Now, all this isn't to say Starmer hadn't done his job properly in relation to other cases. However, given just a few examples here, it's difficult to call his approach consistent, and in some cases is downright sociopathic. It all offers an insight into what kind of a leader he is as a leader of the Labour Party, but also what kind of a prime minister he would be. Now, aside from the dishonesty he's shown in order to become Labour leader and his dishonest approach to political matters since, his previous life as DPP shows a man riven by inconsistency and inhumanity at times. Now, I shall read Oliver Eagleton's book with interest. Anyone else with concerns about Starmer might care to do so as well.